I can't believe they have us guarding CDs. This is the year 2020, isn't that dead technology?
The boss says it's more than just some CDs.
What the heck is that supposed to mean?
I don't know. I overheard the boss telling Ocelot that there's some data on those disks that's extremely valuable to the government.
What could possibly be on those disks that's valuable to the government?
There have been no check-ins from Sector 8 in 30 minutes. What are you idiots doing down there?
Sorry, sir. We've been doing an extensive search of Sector 8 to make sure no intruders have been able to manage to sneak in. Everything looks clear down here.
Good. Keep it that way and make sure to report your status at the next scheduled time or you'll be hearing from the boss.
Yes, sir.
That guy's a real jerk.
I know, and he sounds like a real idiot when he yells.
Your radio is still open, soldier.
Sorry, sir. We'll get right back to patrolling.
This is Paint. Colonel, can you hear me? Sounds like there may be just a few guards patrolling this area. I should be able to take them out pretty easily and get upstairs. Understood. Freeze! Put down your gun.
Please, no!
Sasha Emerson? Think I'm interested in your dog tags? What else do you got? You think I want your spare change? Come on, give me something good.
Fine, fine. I didn't want to give you my most valuable possession, but here it is.
Alright, now we're talking. Rare Pokemon cards. That's exactly what I was after.
Does that mean you'll let me live? Oh.
Alright. So you've shown up, Payne. I've been expecting you to show up. Good job dodging that first shot. Should have expected as much from the man with the same code name as the boss. Don't worry, I won't shoot again. You can come in and face me honorably. This is the famous solid paint then, huh? Let's see how fast you are. Draw. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff in here, but I don't think the discs I'm looking for are in here.
Paige, I've been waiting for you.
Who the hell are you?
I am Psycho Mantis, the most powerful practitioner of psychokinesis and telepathy in the world. Behold. Yes. Look how it moves.
Whatever.
I can see you trembling at the very witnessing of my power.
Why can't I hit you?
Ha! I can read you by every thought. Why couldn't I read you?
Perfect. Alright, now time to find those discs. Understood. Here it is right here. Understood. It's odd. There are no guards anywhere. Oh well. That fool is gonna activate Metal Gear for us. Alright, here we go.
Alright, you might say this review is coming a little bit late. This game was released in September 3rd, 1998, which means this game is close to 22 years old. But to me it's important for the next generation to know this game specifically, as it helped shape many of the games that came after it, and in my opinion, although it does follow a similar design of other games produced at the time, I would say this is, to this day, one of the most creative and engaging games I have ever played. Let's start out by talking about the graphics. So, the graphics have not aged all that well since 1998, but in all fairness, we are talking about early 3D. So that means we're talking about faces without eyes or mouths. The only indication that you have that characters are speaking is their head bobs up and down, and their hands moving in a somewhat emotive fashion. But even so, it's easy to get attached to the characters throughout the story, and it never feels like the gameplay is hindered by the low-resolution models. When you look at similar games of the time, the graphics in this actually push the limits of the PlayStation console and what it was capable of at the time. It's very important to remember that these are early 3D games, back when all the games looked pretty disgusting when compared with the photorealistic graphics that we're spoiled with in the year 2020. Just to go into a discussion of this a little bit further from a technical standpoint, the following are the original specifications of the original PlayStation. For the CPU, we're talking a 32-bit, 33.9 MHz single-core processor, only a measly 2 megabytes of RAM, and an even smaller 1 megabyte of VRAM. Those are tiny numbers when you compare them to a modern PC. For instance, my own PC is running the following: a 64 64-bit, 3.6 gigahertz with up to a 4.6 gigahertz turbo with 8 cores CPU, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and 8 gigabytes of VRAM. This means roughly a modern PC has 8,488 times more powerful processing, 16,000 times more RAM, and 8,000 times more VRAM. And this comparison is not even taking into account the speeds of the RAM or the VRAM or the way data is handled on a modern machine. With all that, I would say that a modern PC is maybe 50 or 100,000 times more powerful than a PS1. So when considering all of that, I would say this game looks amazing for the hardware that it was running on. From a design aspect, in my opinion, this game takes classic tropes that we're all familiar with, such as the spy, the ninja, the gunslinger, the psychic, but recreates them in a memorable and unique way that makes them some of my favorite characters of all time. For example, never has a ninja been more cool than Gray Fox the Cybernetic Ninja. All of these characters look great on the PS1 hardware. Also, the environments are well done and play into the tone of the rest of the game, from the Alaskan environments to the dark futuristic government facilities, and thinking about it now, a random room with liquid hot metal that doesn't really make sense except for to move the plot forward. All of that being said though, and hopefully I'm not beating a dead horse here, but when you consider the hardware this game was made on, the graphics are great for the time. Next, let's talk about the gameplay. Gameplay. This is where the game truly shines and makes it a delight to play for the most part, even 22 years later. There are several portions of this game that have elements that I have never seen in another game before this or after. One of the most memorable for me is during the fight with Psycho Mantis. If you've ever played this game, you probably know exactly what I'm about to talk about. When fighting Mantis, he can read your mind and dodges every shot you fire at him. To defeat him in this fight, you have to switch your controller from the first port of the PlayStation over to the second port. After doing this, Mantis is no longer able to read your mind and you can hit him with your shots. Another very interesting thing that happens is before the Mantis fight, he reads your mind and also makes comments on how many times you've saved your game.
You have not saved often. You are somewhat reckless.
Also at the time, if you happen to be playing a few Konami games, such as Castlevania Chronicles with save files on your memory card, he will mention that he can see you are playing those games as well. If not, he will comment how your memory is completely clean. Of course, this only works if your saves are on the same memory card that the Metal Gear Solid save files are on. These elements are things that I had never seen in a game before this, and I can't think of them being in any other game after, for that matter. And just to muse on the controller port switch to defeat Mantis, that is something that wouldn't really happen again because there's not an easy way to change controller ports anymore, especially since almost all controllers are wireless nowadays. The sneaking in this game is also very fun and works pretty well for what it is. It also introduces the now quite famous hiding underneath a box, and as long as you have not alerted the guards before hiding in the box, they are at first suspicious and then simply say, "Just a box." This is a rather light-hearted, almost joke compared to some of the much darker story elements and tone throughout the rest of this game. There are also some interesting gameplay elements with the sniping where you have to use diazepam to steady your aim. Diazepam is an actual medication that is used to treat anxiety, muscle spasms, and seizures. Which leads me to another point in this game that we will cover more later when I get into the story, but you can tell that the writers of this story did a lot of research while writing the story for this game that ties reality with fiction and creates a much more believable story, especially since the story itself is extremely over the top. But I'm getting off track. The shooting in this game is fairly nice considering the more isometric point of view. Your aiming does some auto-targeting, but you also have free range to move your target as you please. For modern games though, it may feel strange to be unable to aim in first person with your weapons. Only 2 weapons in this game allow for first person shooting, and those are the Stinger missile launcher and the machine gun mounted to the Jeep at the very end chase scene of the game. Another nice portion of the game is all the puzzle solving. It's rather light, but it does exist, and you get weapons and items to help you progress, such as getting thermal goggles to be able to see lasers that you need to avoid that would normally trigger traps. There are also portions of the game where you need to have a gas mask to get through a certain area, or you need to use the Nikita missile launcher to destroy something in another area to be able to move forward. The boss battles are also fun, and you have to use different tactics to defeat each one, ranging from fighting a cybernetic ninja who can become invisible, fighting the psychic that I mentioned previously, and a giant mech, just to name a few. So I feel like, for the most part, I've done nothing but praise this game, but there is one portion of the gameplay that I found rather unenjoyable, and that is the melee combat. There is no way to lock onto your enemy, and it can make melee combat extremely hard to be accurate with. For the most part in this game, though, that is not an issue, except for the last fight with Liquid that can be, let's just say, extremely frustrating. Let's move on to the music. The music in this game has some of my favorite tracks of all time that I'm still known to hum from time to time to this day.
What are you waiting for? Shoot!
Don't talk to me like a rookie!
I'm telling you, shoot!
The music in this game is wonderful, and I love it. But let's move on to the story. The story is by far the most compelling and amazing part of this game, and you can tell that the writers were not only passionate about what they were writing about, but also knowledgeable in most of its subject matter. The story dives into several dark, murky, ethical dilemmas that were facing the world at the end of the 1990s, and honestly are still concerning subjects over 20 years later. The primary subjects of this game are gene therapy and manipulation, nuclear proliferation, as well as government and military conspiracy, and of course giant mech robots. Instead of me blathering on about what the story is, let's take a minute to enjoy the intro of this game that explains the story premise quite well.
The nuclear weapons disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago was attacked and captured by next-generation special forces, being led by members of Foxhound. They're demanding that the government turn over the remains of Big Boss, and they say that if their demands are not met within 24 hours, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. You'll have two mission objectives. First, you're to rescue DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and the president of Armstech, Kenneth Baker. Both are being held as hostages. Secondly, you're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to make a nuclear strike and stop them if they do.
What's the insertion method?
We'll approach the disposal facility by sub.
And then?
We'll launch a one-man SDV. After the SDV gets as close as it can, dispose of it. From there on, you'll have to swim. High-tech Special Forces Unit Foxhound. Your former unit, and one that I was a commander of.
So they're still around.
There are 6 members of Foxhound involved in this terrorist activity. Psycho Mattis, with his powerful psychic abilities. Sniper Wolf, the beautiful and deadly sharpshooter. Decoy Octopus, master of disguise. Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman. And Revolver Ocelot, specialist in interrogation and a formidable gunfighter. And finally, in charge of them, Foxhound's squad leader, Liquid Snake.
Liquid Snake.
The man with the same codename as you. The nuclear weapons disposal facility covers the whole island. I'll instruct you by codec after you reach your target.
Anyone going with me?
As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes, this is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
So, as you can see, there are a whole bunch of wild over-the-top elements occurring in this game. One thing I will say about this is if you don't like dialogue and story, you may not enjoy this game because there is a lot of it, and some of the cutscenes are unskippable. But for someone like me who is drawn to a good story more than anything else in a game, this game is an amazing experience and combines many of my favorite things. Just in case you've never played this game before, I think I'll keep the explanation of the plot for this game where it is because honestly, if I went into all the ins and outs of this story, the video would be an hour long at least.
We don't have time to debate.
So, in conclusion, if I were going to put a score on this game, I would give it 10 Hideo Kojimas out of 10. For me, this game is just about as close to perfect as a game can get, and some may disagree with me on this score, but to them I'd say, hey, this is my review show and these are my opinions, so take it all with a grain of salt. But I've got to say, if you've not played this game, just do yourself a favor and figure out a way to play it. PlayStation Classics are fairly cheap right now in the $30-ish range and come with Metal Gear bundled with it. Or it's also fairly easy nowadays to emulate this game on any modern PC.
Yeah, I've beaten the game. You've fallen directly into my trap, brother. By completing Metal Gear, you've activated the detonation code for us. Well, that's fine. You're about to die from Fox Die anyway. Have you ever heard of it? Fox Die? Oh.
Thanks to Brian Valdez for providing part of the props for this episode. It is very much appreciated. If you like this video, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and if you have a game that you would like me to review in the future, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.